So my name is Jackie Medcalf, and I am the founder and executive director of Texas Health and Environment Alliance. And tonight we're going to be discussing our longest running project regarding the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site. A couple of housekeeping items before we get into the presentations. First, I ask that everyone is respectful of one another and that we are all respectful of each other's time. We'll do our best to keep this meeting to an hour as we have promised. Also, all of the lines right now are muted because we're in a webinar format. So we will do Q&A at the end of the meeting. However, if you're like me and you might get a little forgetful and you want to just go ahead and submit a question as you think of it or submit a comment as you think of it, please feel free to do so. You can utilize the comment or the Q&A chat functions. And then also when the lines become unmuted, you can also speak to ask your question or make your comment. All right, so first this evening, I am going to introduce our assistant director to give you a few updates on some of the activities that THEA has been up to. This is the first time that some of you are meeting Rachel. She's our assistant director and she joined us earlier this year. She has a background in environmental studies from Texas A&M, and she also attended or graduated from South Texas College of Law, and we are thrilled to have her on our team. So without further introduction, go ahead, Rachel.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, everybody. Like Jackie said, my name's Rachel. So we have a couple things that we've really been active in doing within the community over the summer and into the early fall months. On Saturday, October 9th, we hosted an outreach booth at the Baytown Nurture Nature Festival, and we were out there with a bunch of other exhibitors educating and raising awareness about not only the waste pits, but also the current fish consumption advisories that the state has issued. While we were out there, we met some amazing people. We received over 50 new signatures for our petition to keep the EPA on track with the cleanup of the waste pits. And we got almost 100 beautiful coloring pages from our community's kids telling the EPA that they really want clean water in their communities and they deserve that. So we had a really great time out there, met some awesome people, and we're really looking forward to attending again next year. So over the summer, our team was out in the community educating local fishermen about the current fish consumption advisories. As you can see from this slide, these are some of the places that we were visiting. And we actually were able to reach a lot of people at these sites. The Texas Department of State Health Services stated that any seafood that comes from the San Jacinto River and the connecting water bodies is not safe to eat. Jackie, if you could switch it to the map. So this is the map that the Department of State Health Services released. I believe it says 2019, but I think they released it in 2020. And while we've been out there, we've noticed that very few of the community members that we've spoken to who are actually out there on the water fishing. They didn't know. They were unaware that the seafood is not safe for them to catch and bring home for their families to eat. So we realized that our outreach is really important in these communities. So we decided to continue our outreach through the fall and winter months, but we're changing to have a slightly different approach at this point. So now we're going to go directly to local community centers, churches, schools, businesses, and even some libraries to give out the informational packets that we were giving out face-to-face. And we're hoping that we're going to reach more of the community and spread more awareness of the dangers of eating the contaminated fish and seafood in our local waters. And we're hoping that with these bigger audiences, we'll be able to reach more people. So we're working to increase our local partners. So if you think that your place of business or place of worship might be interested in hosting educational materials, please let us know. Our team member Marissa is going to drop in the chat one of our contact information, so that if you do think that you have a place that we could come and pass out some information, please shoot us an email. It'd be really great. So we're going to be out in the community a couple of times a month. So if you see us, please stop and say hi and ask any questions you may have. And if you see a packet at any of your local churches or community centers, feel free to grab one and learn a little bit more about the fish consumption advisories. All right, Jackie.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so now we are going to get into a bit of the technical part of our conversation this evening. Let's see. So, all right. First, I want to go ahead and give you all an aerial view of the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site before we start talking about either the northern impoundment or the southern impoundment specific. I wanted to just give us a good spatial reference. So the blue outline here is what is defined as the site boundary by the EPA. It's an ambiguous line. It does not mean that that's where the contamination that spread over time, where that stops. It's literally an ambiguous line that the agency has to draw. They have to create a boundary to focus the most intense part of the studies. And this area here outlined in red is the northern impoundment. On an average tide, it's about 60% submerged in the river. And then this outlined area here in yellow is the southern impoundment. So I just wanted to note, you will hear me use a few terms this evening that are interchangeable. One, in impoundment. When I say the southern or the northern impoundment, I'm also referring to a pit. And so I might also call that same spot a pit or the site. And so looking back through time, I love to be able to show what the site has looked like through history, and then getting closer to current day from an aerial view. So looking here, starting in 1966, you can see that there is this pit here that was already constructed or being worked on. And so that's the northern pit. And you can see that there's actually quite a bit of land around the northern pit, much more than there is today. And this area here is the southern pit that was being utilized at that time. So fast forward to 1978, you can see that much of this land is either submerged or gone. There was dredging in this area for sand. And so it's a very popular area to dredge sand for beer bottles, roads, foundations, all kinds of uses. And then you notice here, the southern site looks vastly different as well. It looks like there's actually development going on top of what used to be this dark lagoon. Forward to 1995, you can see noticeable differences in the area as well. And then also to 2010, you can see it is vastly different. And I mean, the amount of facilities in the area is vastly different, as is the amount of the northern pit in particular that is still there. It's strikingly different than 1966 or even 1978. All right, so tonight we are going to spend most of our time talking about the latest development with the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site, and that is the announcement from the EPA of the Unilateral Administrative Order. So we're going to talk about what this order is and really kind of the ins and outs of this order and what it means for the waste pit. So as I showed you earlier, we have two primary pits when we're talking about this Superfund site. And interestingly enough, the EPA issued this unilateral order only for the southern site. They did not issue this order for both of the main pits. And looking at that, the northern pit is not as far along in the process. And so the EPA essentially said, we don't want the issues at the northern pit to slow down the cleanup overall. So they went ahead and pushed forward with this order for the southern site. The interesting thing here is that the order only notes the International Paper Company as a respondent, whereas the northern pit has both the waste management subsidiary Mimic and International Paper that are the respondents. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, something we had not seen before. Historically, the EPA had said that both of the companies have had involvement in the site and were both respondents. And now with this order, they have only issued it to one of the two companies. So this order essentially advances the site, the southern site only, through the next phase in the Superfund process. So the southern site was right here at the cleanup part of the Superfund process, and it's now moved the Superfund site right here to the remedial action phase. So this is the part of the process where construction is actually going to occur. So this is a huge step forward in the Superfund process. This is a step that our communities have been waiting on for a very, very long time. And it does not mean construction is going to start tomorrow, but it does mean that this is the phase of the Superfund process, of this long, arduous, daunting process. This is when that physical removal of contamination is going to take place. So the EPA estimates that procurement of contracts and materials will take about a year. And so if all goes according to the plan, they expect construction, physical removal of material at this site to begin around this time next year. So we will definitely need our community members to continue being the eyes and ears, because remember, at the end of the day, the people who make decisions for these processes, AKA the EPA, they don't live here, right? Our region headquarters is in Dallas and the rest of them are in DC. So there is nothing more important to this process than the knowledge and communication of the local communities. All right, so this order has a lot of information in it. And so I really don't like putting up a lot of text in my slides, but unfortunately, when we get into technical items like this, I do. And so just wanted to let you know very quickly the items that are in this order. First and foremost, there's jurisdiction that's outlined, the parties that are bound. Again, that was International Paper. The findings of fact, we're going to touch on that the most. The conclusions of law, the notice of intent to comply, financial assurance, insurance, a delay in performance, record retention, enforcement, and the administrative record. So what was also included in this document was the record of decision. And so the actual order itself wasn't incredibly long. It is on the EPA's website. And so if you're interested, or I know we have a few reporters joining us tonight, the order is available at the EPA's website if you are interested. Okay, so going through some of the findings of fact. This photo was not in the order, but this is a photo of the Southern Impoundment being created in the mid-1960s. This is actually the Southern Pit, literally, with the paper mill pulp, the waste material being pumped into that unlined pit. And as you can see right there on the bank of the San Jacinto River. So anything that you see on these slides that's in italic font came straight from this order. So it is not my original thoughts nor my original work. It's literally, I want to show you the language directly from the order. So starting out in the finding of facts, some of the very basic items that they outline in this order, stating that the waste material was brought over from Champion Paper Mill in Pasadena, Texas, and it was both solid and liquid waste material. All right. They go on to state the primary contaminants of concern being the one specific type of dioxin, often referred to as TCDD, and then the one specific type or congener that's a dibenzofuran, and that's often referred to as TCDF. They state here in the finding of facts that TCDD is considered the most toxic of the dioxins and dibenzofurans. There are hundreds of these congeners. There are over a dozen of these congeners in the waste themselves and that have been found in the surrounding environment. But that TCDD is the most toxic. So going on in the finding of facts, they lay out some of the highest levels of sampling that have been found to date at the site. So the highest level of TCDD that was found at the southern pit, again, this is very different in terms of depth and concentrations of contaminants than at that northern pit. This is just the southern pit. The highest TCDD sample found at the southern pit is 175,000 nanograms per kilogram. The northern pit is much higher than that. The highest furan sample at the southern pit was 279,000 nanograms per kilogram. So we are talking high, very high concentrations of dioxin and furans here. Just to touch on the cleanup goal, at the southern site is 240 parts per trillion, which is the standard for a construction worker scenario. Okay, I thought this part was interesting and that, the EPA chose to include this in laying this out in the finding of facts. They stated that the waste material at the site is highly toxic, and dioxin is also very persistent in the environment and expected to remain toxic for a long time, estimated in the record of decision to be approximately 500 years. Dioxins cause many adverse health effects and are probable cancer-causing agents. 500 years. When we think about what our future is going to be like, what this river is going to look like in 500 years, it's unfathomable, really. We are on a sinking coast. We know that there's historical subsidence in the area. Our coast has evolved through time, through sinking and subsidence. And so being able to foresee what the area will look like in 500 years is really difficult, and how many storms this area will endure between now and then. So that's one of the important reasons why this waste has to be removed where it is, because it's simply too vulnerable. It's too toxic. It's going to persist for far too long. And it's in an area that we cannot reasonably foresee the stability of. All right, so this slide tells on what I was just discussing. And so basically they laid out in the findings of facts that the site has been and likely will continue to be affected by extreme weather conditions, such as strong storm winds, flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes, and that they may cause a potential release or migration of dioxin and furan contaminated material. They also go on to list in the finding of facts the severe and major floods that that area has had. And it's really striking, what some of the storm surge heights have been through the past. And there's one thing we know that these scenarios are going to continue into the future. All right, so moving on from the finding of facts, the financial assurance portion of the order. So this is point 70, and in order to ensure completion of the work, the respondent shall secure financial assurance initially in the amount of $9,932,000. So this is the estimated cost of work for the southern impoundment. So this is the part of the order where the EPA lets the respondent know what they're estimating it will cost based on what's already taken place to date through the design work and all of the investigating. There are other items that are in this order that are granted to the EPA under CERCLA, under the Superfund law, if you will. And one of the items that they put in here is a delay in performance note. And so it says respondent shall notify EPA of any delay or anticipated delay in performing any requirement of this order. Such notification shall be made by telephone and email to the EPA project coordinator within 48 hours after respondents first knew or should have known that a delay might occur. So I know that there have been delays with this site, way more delays than the community wants. And I know that that's one of the last things that the community wants any more of. So I was glad to see that there was this delay in performance part where they have to be in communication under this order with the EPA should they um, in, see a delay that's going to occur. Excuse me. Okay, and then the next is the enforcement or work takeover. So the agency actually has a lot of authority when it comes to these Superfund sites. The agency under the Superfund law has the authority to completely take over these sites, do the work, hire the contractors, do the work, and then bill the responsible parties. And so the portion here I wanted to point out to you on the enforcement and work takeover states, any willful violation or failure or refusal to comply with any provision of this order may subject respondent to civil penalties up to the maximum amount authorized by law. And CERCLA here, that is what I'm referring to as the Superfund law. It's a statute there. As of the date of issuance of this order, the statutory maximum amount is $59,017 per violation per day. So not only, is this order requiring International Paper to have the financial assurance for the roughly $10 million price tag for this cleanup, it's also got a bit of teeth to back that up, where if there are violations, then they can rack up over $59,000 per violation per day. So that could add up pretty quickly. So we have a couple of really important follow-up items that came from this order that our team is either currently working on or is going to be following up on. And so one is the groundwater. Groundwater in this area has always been some difficult, if you will, to get resolution to get a firm understanding of. It seems, that there's not a lot of consistency with what's been found where in the groundwater, but at the end of the day, we know that this stuff has been found in the groundwater. And so I wanted to point out the part here that they included in the order. And it says, according to the 2013 draft remedial investigation, addendum table 3.1, detected analytes in groundwater and soil investigation area 4. TCDD, dioxin, was detected in unfiltered groundwater samples in 3 of the 6 monitoring wells evaluated. So in half of the monitoring wells at the site, they found dioxin. Okay, dioxin is hydrophobic. It does not like to stay in water. It wants to readily settle out of the water. And so for it to be in the groundwater, that indicates that there could be a couple scenarios, but one is that it is likely being released into the water, actively disturbed. And these monitoring wells were at the site down through the waste material. But what you should know about that is that this shows that the waste material is in communication with the groundwater system. Even though it was the groundwater that's within the pit, it's still in communication with the groundwater system. And groundwater, guess what? It does move. It doesn't move quickly, but it does move. Okay, and so also TCDF furans was detected in unfiltered groundwater samples in 4 of the 6 monitoring wells. Additionally, the unfiltered samples at a specific well for dioxin furans had an estimated toxic equivalency concentration of 60.2 picograms per liter, which is over twice the Texas Risk Reduction Program protective concentration level of 30 picograms per liter. So typically when you have a protective level, like it's indicated here, this 30 picograms per liter, which is also the max contaminant limit for these contaminants, and that's set by the federal government, that prompts some sort of government response for cleanup. And so we know that there's going to be a considerable amount of groundwater that is incurred during this cleanup, and as well as river water, obviously. And that is estimated to be one of the greatest costs, is actually cleaning and disposing or pumping back in, depending on what technology is used. But that is likely going to be one of the greatest costs of this cleanup. All right, the other follow-up item is on construction workers. So it states in this order that the Southern impoundment poses unacceptable risks to the construction worker, that the hazard index for this site is 46. These risks result from the release or threatened releases of dioxin and furans from the site. So protection of construction workers at these sites has been an issue as long as I have been involved in this site. So a very long time. You know, back when I was living in the community, had we seen construction workers on that site wearing, you know, respirators or hazmat suits, you know, wearing more protective equipment other than maybe some steel toe boots, an orange vest, and a hard hat, we wouldn't have been thinking they were coming in and building up the land to put like a restaurant we could pull our boats up to or something. You know, we might have actually thought, hey, what's going on there? Like, is something wrong there? But nobody thought that, because there were just construction workers out there and no types of masks or really special protective equipment at all. And come to find out, the material that the construction workers are given does not have safety data sheets in them that detail all of these contaminants that are at the site. And so we've been trying to get those included so that construction workers who come to the site can fully understand what it is that they're potentially going to come in contact with, how they can be exposed. You know, would they have to swallow it? Could they inhale it? What happens if it touches their skin? And if any of these exposures occur, how to respond. And so it's important for our construction workers to understand that type of information. Shouldn't be going to work and being exposed on the job, or maybe even bringing home, you know, these types of contaminants. And so our team has been working on this and seeing that the appropriate agencies with jurisdiction to truly enforce this are aware and involved in this ongoing issue. All right, so now we get to the intent to comply. So this is a separate document, and this right here is an excerpt from the page you see here. This is from International Papers team, and essentially there's a whole bunch of legal jargon here, but what I want to point out is that so this is International Papers response to the EPA's order, and it says here, without admitting any of the findings of fact. So essentially the facts that I just went over with you and then some, all the finding of facts in the order. It's saying here, that it's without admitting any of the finding of facts. And then the last thing here, it says international paper hereby notifies EPA pursuant to paragraph 57 of the order of its intent to comply with the order. So they're basically saying, we don't agree with this, but we're gonna comply. And they actually offer quite a bit of information in this document about why other parties should be included as responsible parties and not just international paper. Nonetheless, this site is moving forward and, moving into this construction phase that I've talked about earlier. So what does that look like? All right, so we're looking at an aerial view of the southern impoundment. I have cut off the northern portion so you don't see the entire site because I wanted to be sure to get in these areas where the waste is concentrated that's going to actually be removed. So unlike the northern pit, this whole site is not going to be removed because other waste material was dumped here over time, like construction debris. So it's not necessarily consistent where the hottest spots of this waste material are at. So the site is outlined by this black dashed line. And then these polygons represent the varying concentration of waste material that is going to be removed. Going from the green tones to the red is increasing in concentration of the waste material. And you'll notice that this one here to the farthest south, that really just barely goes beyond the site perimeter to the southeast. And over here to the southwest, it actually goes to the river's edge. So in this area, they will have to isolate this area from the river's water. But this is the only area that will need to be isolated from the actual river. The rest of the areas that will be remediated are landlocked. And so this is a bit of a special case down here. And then, so these other colored areas are the hot spots, if you will, where the waste material is going to be removed. And in many of these places, you have to go beyond 2 feet deep to actually get to the higher concentrations of the waste material. All right, so here we are, as I showed you in the remedial action phase of the Superfund process. And it's like literally the home stretch. This is really, really great progress. And from there, the next step in this process is construction completion. So this is a great place to be. Can't happen fast enough for the environment, for the folks who live in that area, for the health of our aquatic ecosystem. Can't happen fast enough. But as I noted, the construction is estimated to begin in the fall of next year. So that leads us to a couple of updates for the northern pit. All right, so the northern waste pit had extensive sampling that took place this summer. We're still waiting on the results from the EPA. I don't really know what the holdup is, but we still have not received those results. So we're waiting patiently. And once we have them and our technical team goes through them, which should not take too long, we will definitely be contacting all of our community members, all of you, and letting you know what we're seeing in the sampling results. So there's a lot going on the screen here, but what you're looking at is an aerial view of the northern waste pit, and it is outlined by the black dashed lines. And so it's quite large. And all of the blue dots indicate the locations where samples were taken over the summer. So there was a lot of sampling that took place, and really looking forward to being able to get that information. It's really important that that they got it right this time. Sampling has taken place again and again and again at this site, and it's kind of like, come on already. We're still learning about the extent of this site. Here we are, what, 10 plus years after this site was listed as a national priority for cleanup. We're still trying to understand it. And so it's really important that these sites that were sampled indicate to the EPA and the teams that are working on the design for this cleanup how deep the waste goes, how far out the waste goes, what concentrations are where. Because as this northern pit has gone through the Superfund process, they found some surprises, like the waste is over twice as deep as the agency and the responsible parties and their contractors once thought anyways, or claimed to think. If you ask the community, it was no surprise. They always thought it was much deeper than originally indicated. So these samples are going to be an important step for us to get to this next part in the process where the southern site is at. So aside from that, the final design for the northern pit is due to the EPA in February of 22. So this coming February, the agency should be receiving the final design. There is a technical team that works through these items while the process is ongoing. So ideally, there should not be too much lag time from when this final design is submitted to the agency and when it's approved, because they are working on this on an ongoing basis. But that's the idea. So we will look to have some updates from the EPA on the design in the first quarter of next year. All right, I see some questions in the chat. Let's see. Okay, so the advisory that we talked, I'm sorry, there's a question in the chat. Does the risk area extend down to Clear Lake? Hey, Marissa, can you try to unmute everybody for me? And let me know if you don't have the function. I want to go ahead and unmute everybody so that we can engage that way as well. However, addressing the question that's in the chat, does the risk area extend down to Clear Lake? The current advisory, if we're talking about the fish consumption advisory, because this was dropped pretty early in the presentation. So I believe, Don, that you're talking about the advisory. This advisory in particular goes to the 146 bridge. And so there are different advisories as you move forward. So this is more of San Jacinto related tributaries and upper Galveston Bay. And then as you go through the bay, through the coast, there are different advisories. The agency that issues the advisories is Texas Department of State Health Services. And they are the agency who, oops. Sorry about that. They're the ones that you can go to their website and find the advisories on any water body that has an advisory in the state of Texas. All right, does anybody have any questions? Hey, Carolyn, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
All right, we've got a question here in the chat. How long is the removal from the southern pit expected to take? You know, Mark, that's a really great question, and I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry that I don't have an answer. In total, I know that the estimate for the total cleanup is around 10 years, but I don't know specifically only for the southern pit. That's a great question, and I will find out, and let's follow up on that. If my team could please make note to make sure that I get the answer to that question. Seasonal limitations, yes. Okay. He asked if they have seasonal limitations like they do at the northern. It's my understanding that they do. So looking at the peak flood seasons, that has indicated when the EPA is going to have the actual removal of material taking place at the Superfund site. And so at first we thought that it was just going to be non-hurricane season, but what the agency has done is they've actually gone back and looked through historical flood data and saw that from about April on, it is the peak actual flood season, and that a lot of historical floods had taken place on the river prior to hurricane season. And so there is a good portion of the year where there will not be construction. All right. Hey, Carolyn, do you want to go ahead and let everybody know about the upcoming Channel View meeting?
Sure. Yes, we will be having our CHIC meeting in person Thursday night, starting at 6 o'clock. At 5:30 to 6:20, we'll have social if anybody wants, as the people are coming in. We will be discussing 2 new permits that the Army Corps of Engineers is considering, or just letting people know about them, and a few other items. I'm drawing a blank right now, but I did want to let you know that driving past the Northern Impoundment, coming home from Maytown, the buoys are broken.
Oh, okay.
A section of them would be at the northwest corner of the buoys, I believe. We also, too, the other day, saw some people out there literally in a boat fishing at the orange buoys.
They do that all the time.
I know it just freaks you out, but
Yeah,
that's what Bobby said. Well, they do it all the time. Can't fix it, but the buoys are broken. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
yeah, thank you so much. I will definitely be letting the EPA know that probably tonight. I'll probably send an email right when we get off. Yeah, thank you very much. I know when the buoys have been broken in the past, people will bring their boats in there and they'll actually fish.
Yes.
Like you're literally on top of a Superfund site at that point.
Yeah, and there's a big open section. You could bring in a big boat within there. In fact, I was wondering, did a barge yank them loose? But maybe not. I did want to let everyone know that the meeting is at the Channel View Fire Department, Station number 3, 1210 Dell in Channel View. So
Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn.
thank you.
All right. All right. Does anybody else have a question for us this evening?
This is going to be available. This whole presentation is available on Facebook.
Yes, so we are live on Facebook right now, and that will stay on THEA's Facebook page. And then the recording of the presentation, by the end of the week, it will be posted to our YouTube channel. So if you search for us on YouTube, you can find a recording of most of the presentations that we've given over the past year.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure because I missed the first part of the meeting. Wasn't home yet, and I wanted to give the updates at our meeting. So I wanted to be able to go back, or if you provide them, I'll share them.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. I really appreciate that.
I was surprised. I want to say at the Nurture Nature Fest.
Yeah.
I was really surprised at how many people I asked, do you know where the waste pits are? And they didn't. And they were from Baytown. They were from the area. But, you know, it surprises me that as much as we've talked about them and the articles have been in the local papers and everything.
Right.
How many people were saying, no, and what are they? That was the other one. And what are they?
Yeah, and you know, like the fish consumption advisory outreach, you know, so many people completely unaware of that. And so it just, you know, goes to show you how important our outreach is. You know, there's tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people really in the area that need to be reached. And over the years, you know, we've definitely reached over 50,000, but there's still so many more who need to be aware of this. And if we have this information, then we can make more informed decisions for our families. And so when we have outreach events like the Nature Festival or like the Fish Consumption Advisory outreach, and we still are finding people who have no idea, maybe they're new to the area, maybe they've lived there forever and have no idea, it just really validates the need for this type of outreach.
The part of 2100 that goes from I-10 to the ferry. That first, that one part that immediately starts with the water and goes on.
Yeah.
It was totally full on one side and partially on the other side of people lined up fishing. Families, little tiny kids. You could hardly drive a car down that road. I think somebody needs to monitor that road from time to time. I don't know who that would be, unless it would be the policeman or the park rangers.
Yeah. And that's, you know, one of the things I was talking about in a meeting earlier today with the university and what kind of policy is needed, because there's no ban, right? So essentially people aren't doing anything that's in any of the authorities can enforce stopping them. But we know it's not safe. So, you know, what more can be done? And so, Rachel, is that an area that y'all have done outreach in? They're passing Four Corners going to the ferry?
I don't think so. I don't think we went that far. We mostly stayed on Market Street and then the other side of I-10 frontage road.
Okay. All right. So we'll definitely add that, Sarah, to the places that our team goes. And also
go ahead
to potentially get signage. We're working on asking for the local government to put additional signage out.
And I also noticed when we were out at the Nature Fest out there at the Nature Center, there were a lot of people out there in the water fishing.
Yes.
I didn't see any signage. And I'm sure in the Nature Center, they don't want the signage, but I was surprised to see them fishing there.
Yeah. And they have signs at the pier or at the piers there at the Nature Center, but you know, they essentially are not preventing the fishing. They're giving safe access to the water. but they have the advisory signs from Department of State Health Services, which if you ask, your average fisherman, they're not going to really look at them. There's
No.
a ton of stuff up there. They're confusing. We don't really understand what they mean. And so we're proposing new types of signs that are just short and sweet, to the point, that people will hopefully actually pay attention to and realize, okay, wait, this actually could have adverse effects for my family's health.
Fish skeletons next to a human skeleton.
Yeah.
I always heard about, when I went to Lee College, I'd always hear about, I think it's the Simpsons, the fish on the Simpsons that has the 3 eyes. That's what you'll hear about also.
Yeah.
So, but the good thing is, though, that areas, water bodies that have had similar Superfund sites as the waste pits, in terms of the types of contaminants that are there, once that source of waste has been removed, the aquatic life has been able to recover within 5 to 15 years. And so what that means is once the waste pits are removed, then there's actually a chance that in our lifetime, you could be able to safely fish the waterway again.
Well-
And so, yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
Oh, well, that I'm just thinking that if it's taking, what'd you say, 15 years for the cleanup? And then it
10.
takes another 15 years for it to be safe to eat the fish. We're looking at 30 years.
Yeah, I'll be a grandma.
Well, in 30
Yay.
years.
I'll be in your dreams.
You will be.
So, you have a question?
Gosh, yeah. So Dawn is asking, after I eat contaminated fish, how long is it that I have correlated health issues? So the interesting thing about these types of contaminants is that it's often a longer term effect if you're going to have an effect from the exposure. There are shorter term effects like chloracne. That's really one of the telltale signs of dioxinate exposure. So you can have more short term, but it's not like food poisoning, where you would, within 24 hours or within a short time period, actually have adverse health effects that would be noticeable. It is more of a long-term effect down the road that you could have an effect from the contaminants.
So what would be a description of chloracne?
Chloracne is, that's a good question. I'm actually losing the words to describe it. It's like a rash, but it's more,
Okay.
I think I can't think of the word, but it's like a rash on your skin.
Okay, like a red whelping rash, or with pustules, or just
Yeah, they're
curious.
more like cysts that are part of the rash. All right, folks. Well, thank you all for spending. Okay, Dawn. So it may be perceived as risk like smoking.
Could be
Long-term risk
long term. Yeah.
from when you smoke your cigarette to when you actually get cancer.
Sure. Okay, so thank you all for joining us this evening and being engaged in the presentation. And as a reminder, if you joined late or know anyone who missed it and wants to view it at a later time, it will be on our YouTube channel by the end of the week, and it is on our Facebook right now. I look forward to seeing you all at our next meeting, and I hope everyone has a good night. Take care.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay. Thank you.